I'm Molly. I'll be your host and camerawoman as I take you back into Creswell's past. I'll be taking you on a tour of historic buildings and also locations of where things once were. Creswell was incorporated in 1909, but it had been growing for quite a while before then. They just had to wait for the population to grow large enough to incorporate it. During this time, the major industries were fruit growing, farming, and also logging. There was probably over 400 acres of prunes in the area. The railroad came here in 1871, and that continued to help the population growth. In 1873, the post office was christened, and Creswell was named after the Postmaster General of the time, John Creswell. I'm standing here at the Creswell Faith Center, and this is where the stage stop was before the railroad came. James and Jemima Robinette ran this stage stop. James had some property, well, a lot of property, that ran adjacent to another man's property, and they both donated the part of their lands that were adjacent to form to donate an area to plat the town, which is now Oregon Avenue. Before the railroads came, there was also stern-wheelers that went up and down the Willamette River carrying passengers and freight. But when the train came, then there went the stage stops and the stern-wheelers. They all died out. I'm going to show you a house that was built in 1905 that sits on the property here at Faith Center. The Blue Valley book, they said that this was built in 1905, but a woman who works here told me that a couple taxmen came and asked her, how do you like working in a building from the 1800s? So it is kind of a mystery how old this place is, but it's a interesting house, and I'm going to show you some closer up look too, so you can see the detail of this building. building in Creswell, which is the first school that we had here. We're at South 2nd Street at the first schoolhouse. It was built in 1874. It recently got a new foundation put on. Also, you may have noticed that the schoolhouse used to have 2 stories. There was a fire that burned the upper story, unfortunately. Not only has it served for school, but also it's been a gathering place for the townspeople over the years. They used to have Grange meetings here, also church services, and annual Christmas parties, and also the brass band used to practice here. During World War I, it was war relief headquarters, and women would come here and knit clothing for the soldiers and also wrap bandages. In 1898, the Oregon Baptist Society purchased it, and then later, in 1926, they sold it to the Civic Improvement Club for $150. Later, the Civic Improvement Club turned it into a library. Next, I'm going to take you to the Methodist Church. We're at 5th Street and Oregon Avenue at the Methodist Church. It was built in 1889. The Methodist people continued to have services here up until 1972. And then in 1975, the museum opened. The museum has such a vast amount of information and photos that it exceeds far beyond what I had imagined for a museum in a town of 5,000. I think a person could easily spend 2 hours just looking around in here. Also, they have booths or segments depicting what the businesses that used to be here looked like. They have them set up with all the antiques. Like, for instance, the millinery, they have all the hats set up to look like it did back then, and then they have the bank and more. Also, they have a really nice gift shop. They have books for sale on Oregon history, also cards for sale, and you can buy photo prints of historical Creswell photos for a minimal fee, so you can hang them on your wall. I hope that people will come here and support them, because they really need the support to continue, and there's just so much more here than you could learn from watching my film. So I hope that my film inspires you to come down to the museum and look around and learn a whole lot more. Next, I'm taking you to the Whistle Stop. We're on Mill Street at the Whistle Stop. The Whistle Stop was named because the railroad comes right by here. This is a very old building that was used as a prune drying facility back when the fruit growing business was big in Creswell. Over a year ago, there was a fire that burned the upper story of this building, unfortunately. But I talked to the owner, and he tells me that he doesn't want to have it bulldozed, that the owner appreciates the historical value of this building and wants to get it fixed up. He told me that the beams in it are of old growth timber, and he also mentioned that his grandpa one day found the original kiln. One day his grandpa found the original kiln in behind the building, and it's an in-ground kiln for prune drying. The owner tells me that this building was used for a railroad office at one time. I guess that's all I have to say about the whistle stop. Next, we'll be taking you to Front Street. This is where the Etna Opera House was, and it opened in 1911. The building you see behind me was built in the 1920s after the Etna Opera House burned. I was able to find 4 articles in the paper about the Etna Opera House. They were in 1911, 1913, and 1912. There was also a photo that I found labeled 1915. The article that I found in 1911 was December 22, 1911 in the Cottage Grove Centennial, and it reads this: Opera House at Creswell. Last Saturday night, the new Opera House and skating rink, just completed by E.J. Moore, was formally opened. The new amusement place is located in the building formerly occupied by the Chronicle. The structure has been entirely remodeled and is one of the neatest theaters in the valley. A maple floor has been laid, and the main floor will have a seating capacity of 425. To the right on entering, seats have been erected for spectators to watch the skaters, and this part has a separate entrance from the theater proper. I'm going to turn the camera down South Front Street. I forgot to mention that we are on South Front Street. So South Front Street here used to be the main street in 1900. We had starting at Oregon Avenue, we had the general merchandise store, and we had a harness shop and the Creswell Drug Company, and we had a boardwalk going up and down here, and we had the hitching rails all the way up and down the street, and straw all along the hitching rails to try to keep the mud down. The general store that was at Oregon Avenue and South Front Street was the only building to survive the fire of 1882. Now I'm going to take you further down to North Front Street and show you some more places. We're on North Front Street now. Behind me is the Dairy Mart, and that is where the train depot used to be. The train depot operated from 1893 to 1932. Next, I'm going to show you the Roundup Saloon. The Roundup Saloon is a very old building. It was built in 1905, and you can see the fancy carving at the top. Well, that's original, and it used to go all the way across the entire building there, but this is the last of it. And I'll show you an old photo of the farmer's store, and you'll see that it had that decorative woodworking up there. Actually, I'm not sure if it's woodworking. It's beautiful when the sun hits it. Next, we're going to walk down North Front Street, and I'm going to show you the Martin boarding house. The Martin boarding house was built in 1902, and it served a lot of the people that came on the train depot, or came by train, sorry. I think it was operating as a boarding house in 1905 because I saw a photograph labeled 1905. But I'm not sure how long it operated as a boarding house. I'm going to take you around to the carriage house and talk about this house some more. Sorry the camera's a little bit crooked, but this was the carriage house back then. And also, the owner told me that there's some tin buildings in his backyard, and that's where there was a structure for Native American people to stay when they were boarding here. Also, there was a larger building that was to the left of this house on their property, and that's where the boarders stayed. I don't know that they actually stayed in the house, but this is an interesting house, and I'm glad to put it on the tour. I forgot to mention that next I'm going to take you to the site of the Fruit Growers Bank. This is a nice mural depicting what the entrance of the downtown used to look like. We had the white sign going across the main street. That white sign was here from 1909 to 1920. Now I'm going to turn the camera and show you where the Fruit Growers Bank used to be. The parking lot of the library was where the Fruit Growers Bank used to be. It opened in 1909 and it closed in the 1930s. Unfortunately, they couldn't make it during the Great Depression. They had a wood counter with the bars going from the counter up, and you can still see that countertop in the Creswell Museum. Now, during the time that it was a bank, the bank tellers got to see the paving of Oregon Avenue, and that took place in 1924, and it cost them over $6,000 to pave 2 blocks. I'm on Oregon Avenue and at the Chamber of Commerce. Before this building was here, it was the Central Hotel. The Central Hotel was here in 1910. I'm not sure what year it opened, but there was an ad that Mr. Scott, the owner, put in the Creswell Chronicle in 1910, and the ad read, "The best hotel in Creswell, starting at just $1.25 per night, or room and boarding for $5 a week. Newly remodeled, bath-in connection, 1 block from Depot." In 1913, Mr. Parsons bought the Central Hotel, and on the lower floor he sold furniture and hardware, and on the upper floor he had a funeral parlor. In 1940, the building was demolished, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be neat if the Central Hotel was still here? Next, I'm going to be taking you to the site of the second and third schools in Creswell. We're at Harry Holt's Park, and this is where the second and third schools used to be. The second school was built just before the turn of the century. But by 1910, it just wasn't large enough to hold all the kids, and the high schoolers were having to take class in the hallway. So in 1910, they built the third school, and the second school was moved to another part of town, and it became apartments. In the 1930s, it was torn down, unfortunately. The third school lasted until 1967, and it was torn down due to it deteriorating. Now I'm going to show you a picture of the third school that always is here in the park. Next, I'm going to take you to Oregon Avenue. This building was originally a wow hall, and not only did they hold Woodsmen of the World meetings here, they also had traveling entertainment groups, and also local talent, and also silent movie nights. After it was the wow hall, it became the Star Theater, and that opened in 1948. Where they had the movie posters here. And then here's the ticket booth. I would love to see the theater open again. I'd love to have a theater here in Creswell. Right now there's some people living in the back part of the building. It closed in the 1960s, I was told. Next, I'm going to take you across the street and show you another location. But first, I want to show you a little bit more detail of this building. creamery used to be here in 1908. And later in the 1920s, Roy and Vance Clack converted it into a garage. And then later in 1948, Floyd Everson rebuilt and opened up Flying A service station. Next, we're going to go down the street a little ways, and I'm going to show you another interesting building. This is the Parsons building. You can see the name Parsons up here. It was built in 1911. Later in 1948, unfortunately there was a fire and it gutted the whole place. So during that time, Walkup's grocery store was here. Also, a different newspaper company, not Creswell Chronicle, but another place was here. And Mr. Walkup decided to rebuild and open his grocery store again in 1949. I read it was rebuilt, but I wonder if he kept the original outer walls because the name Parsons is still on the building. And it was in 1911. The name was still in the same location. So I wonder if he just rebuilt the inside. Right now there's some apartment complexes. There's some apartment complexes up on the side, and we also have a Mexican restaurant on the side. Next, I'm going to take you to another location that I think you'll find interesting. Hi, are you ready to go to the Pioneer Cemetery? I'm going to take the wagon because it's going to be a long way there. Do you want to ride? Oh, you want to walk? Well, that's okay, I guess. I mean, because I'm going to be there a long time anyway, so I guess I'll meet you there. I guess I'll see you in an hour or two. Okay, bye. Hi, welcome to the Pioneer Cemetery. This cemetery was established in 1851. Have you ever thought about what all the symbols on the antique headstones mean? They all have a different meaning, and they can tell you a little bit about the person who's buried there. I'm gonna take you around and show you some examples of some symbols and show you what they mean, and also some other things. here's a weeping willow, and I have this printout here that I got off the internet. You can find what all these symbols mean and take it with you to cemeteries. So this says that the weeping willow means nature's lament, a symbol of sorrow and mourning. And looks like this headstone is from 1858. Now I'm going to take you to another headstone. This is a hand pointing upward. I think this headstone has been repaired. The hand pointing upward means the reward of the righteous, confirmation of life after death, heavenly reward, ascension to heaven. Now I'm going to take you to a headstone with an epitaph and show you how you can read it in an easy way. Oh, here's another one that we can look up. Hands holding. It means, I have that page here. Hands clasped. At first, these hands all seem to be in the same fashion, but a number of interesting characteristics stand out. First, most of the hands illustrate the right hand in a grasp with fingers overlapping the other hand, while the left hand is open. This could be the depiction of a man holding a woman's hand and indicate marriage or a close bond between individuals, unity and affection even after death. Clasped hands are also symbolic of a farewell or last goodbye. Look at the cuff to distinguish between a man's or woman's hand. Woman would have a frilly cuff. The person who died first holds the other's hand, guiding the spouse to heaven. Epitaphs are interesting, and many of them have lines from famous poetry back during that time. And you can look up those, like if you see an epitaph that you're curious about, you can look it up online and see if maybe it matches up with a poem. So I want to show you how to read an epitaph that's hard to read like this without damaging the headstone. See, a lot of people which do not do this, they do rubbings, which means that they put a paper on here and then I think maybe charcoal, or I'm not sure, I've never done it, but that actually harms the engraving, because this is soft stone or like a lot of them are soft stone. And so if you do any kind of rubbing or scrubbing, which don't do, do not do that, because then it wears away the carving of the writing and then you won't be able to read it anymore. So what I do is take a compact mirror, probably a square one would be better, but you just put it under the row of, you just put it under the sentence and it lights up the words. Right now, the way the sun is low, it's not doing a very good job, but if the sun was higher, you'd get a lot more light. It just kind of lights up the words. So yeah, remember to treat these like antiques, because they are antiques and they are kind of fragile. Like, you don't ever scrub these. Well, I guess that concludes the cemetery portion. So next I'll be taking you to the Presbyterian Church. We're on 4th Street at the Presbyterian Church. It was built in 1906. It's a really beautiful building, so I'm going to take you up closer to see the detail of the architecture. Sorry, a flower caught on the tripod, this bush here. This manse was built in 1910 for the minister and his family. There was a reverend who was here named Norm Few, and he was reverend for over 54 years. Well, this concludes the tour. I hope you had a good time and maybe learned something new. Bye.